For better or worse, Throne and Liberty is one of the best looking MMOs that we currently have scheduled and confirmed to release in 2023. On the better side of things, look to be the game's combat, world, and mechanics. There's some really promising and interesting ideas here from what they've shown off so far. As for what's worse, well, that would be the fact that NCSoft are the ones developing and publishing this game, so you better get your wallets ready, just crack them wide open and start pouring the money out. That's what we should expect from the monetization here. However that stuff turns out though, I am here for the ride. I am interested in playing Throne and Liberty, and it is, yeah, a really cool looking upcoming MMO. A lot of the actual game related stuff that they've shown so far does seem pretty interesting, and it's one of the main reasons I am generally looking forward to this game. Well, this week brought us 10 whole new minutes of director's preview. They went into some details about the game, mechanics, and systems. So let's jump in and check all of that out. So the video opened up with one developer talking about being a lifetime fan of MMOs and the varied experiences delivered by the genre. And hey, I'm right there with you. It's the reason it's one of my favorite genres in all of gaming. MMOs are just so very unique still to this day with the type of gaming experience that they give to us, really. I absolutely love the immersion, the social interaction, the sense of exploration and adventure, all of those things combined to something that is really unique to MMOs. One really interesting thing that he mentioned here was saying that the best platforms for players to enjoy TL on, in my opinion, would be PC and console. The value and emotion of an MMO cannot be experienced on mobile. Do keep in mind with some of these quotes that we are translating Korean into English, and there is some meaning lost within that, or some translations that sound a little funny. Really, I think what he's getting at here is, hey, mobile is not a great platform for the type of experience that MMOs deliver, to which I wholeheartedly agree. I got nothing against the platform. People enjoy mobile games, that's fine. There have been mobile games that I have enjoyed, but by and large, I just don't find it very immersive. I really dislike a lot of the restrictions that come from the smaller screen, but also just the interface and the way you interact with it, with the touchscreen and all of that. All of which is to say, I feel like mobile games can be restrictive when we're talking about cross-platform things, unless you very strategically manage to make something that's very fitting for like the console or PC platform, but then somehow also works on mobile. When mobile's thrown into the equation, I do feel like that tends to restrict the other platforms that those games are played on. It doesn't have to be the case, but in my experience, that has largely been the case. So for that reason, I'm excited to hear that Project TL is a PC and console first game, but it can be played on mobile, which we'll touch on later on in this video. Okay, so that was just basically the introduction of the developer blog. Now let's get into the meat of things. For the remaining 8 or so minutes, a few other developers basically took turns talking about different aspects of the game, and this was where things really got interesting. So first, they spent some time on the open world and various systems within, saying the world, which has no boundaries, is the foundation that allows players to connect with one another. It allows for endless ways to interact. Along those same lines, it was later said the reason why we connected the world into a single zone is that meeting players and constructing communities is the essence of an MMO. I do believe we knew this was the case, but it's good to get confirmation that this is going to be one big open world, seamless, which implies no loading screens between zones, but also it does seem like that seamlessness also applies to the dungeon experience, which is really cool. They showed a bunch of different open world gameplay in these sections, and I thought it all looked really good, not only in the scale of the environment and the visual fidelity, but also there was a lot of players, big open spaces, and a ton of verticality, which I'm really excited. I love when MMOs go deep into having multiple tiers of levels and various heights for you to climb and descend down from. I like when they do that, and they also implement traversal systems that make engaging with that verticality interesting, which it does look like Throne and Liberty does look like they're going to do. But here's something that I'm really excited about. Let's talk about the dungeons. Take, for example, an underground dungeon with a separate entrance and main area. In it, there are multiple floors and spaces, but we have connected all of the spaces together. Moving immediately to the lowest floor is possible, and aid can be given or damage can be dealt to others on different floors. So here they're saying essentially that the dungeons are not going to be linear whatsoever, and that there is going to be verticality. verticality, and they showed this off in the trailer as well. It showcased a fly-through of a dungeon, starting off outside, moving through the exterior to the inside, and then down several layers, again showing off tons of verticality, flying through a boss room, past some gates into this large open area, all seemingly with no loading screens, and several groups, large groups of players running around, walking into the dungeon, fighting PvE encounters, all of this happening simultaneously. So it does appear like at least some of the dungeons in this game are not going to be instants, and they're going to be kind of like the classic old school MMOs, talking about back in the EverQuest days when dungeons were just open for people to go in, and there could be groups there fighting, a boss could be engaged with. Really curious how they're going to manage respawns, I suppose, in this case. I imagine there's going to be some system of either resetting the boss, maybe by engaging with something in the environment, or just they will be on regular old mob respawn timers. It does seem like it's not just the world that's open with no loading screens between zones, but also dungeons. I just have to say, dude, I can't tell you how pumped and excited I am to see this just huge open dungeon. And like with the world, the verticality that they're showing here, it looks sick. It's so cool to see the camera just go down through several layers, flying past a boss fight into this huge expansive area. And you take into consideration that this game is going to have a lot of various traversal options, mostly through their system of changing into different animals, which basically represent aquatic, land, and air mounts. And these are just basically the ways of traversing the environment that replace a traditional MMO mount system where you're summoning a horse or something to fly on or whatever. And then that in conjunction with the fact that the game has mantling, letting your character climb up onto objects that they can reach, as well as a grapple hook system, knowing all of that traversal potential with this, what they're showing off is tons of verticality. I really feel like that is something that is missing from a lot of MMOs that I've played in recent years. It just feels immersive to go into a game or go into a dungeon like the one that they showcased, and knowing that it just goes lower and lower and lower and lower, and you'll have fights and stuff all along the way, or there's tons of stuff that you can skip if you want. You can just completely skip certain encounters. You don't have to just go through a linear path, and they actually touch on this as well, saying by connecting the interior, exterior, top, and bottom of the dungeon, we hope that players can share this common spatial experience. Moreover, rather than just rushing through the fields, players can discover their own routes in three-dimensional terrain. Really cool. Generally, I'm excited. Obviously, the major concern is the idea of huge groups swooping through dungeons, completely clearing everything quickly and ruining the experience for smaller groups or even solo players. That is a concern. That is absolutely a concern when you have this idea of non-instance dungeons. It's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of MMOs moved away from it. Like with a lot of things, there are pros and cons. Personally, if nothing else, whether or not the idea of an open dungeon, non-instance dungeon system really works in the end, it's nice to see something different from, again, what most modern day MMOs do, the instanced dungeon experience. Okay, next up, they spent some time talking about the weather system and how it can impact the environment and players. We have known that this is going to be a thing in the game where, depending on the time of day and the weather, things will change. Well, we got some more concrete examples. They said, weather and environment have visual effects to augment the sense of reality. This living world is all about adapting to the environment. Depending on the changes in the setting, terrain may feel different, ecosystems may undergo changes, and intriguing events can spring up. And we saw some examples. We saw a stone quarry filling up with water during a storm. We saw these sleeping golems waking up during sunrise, plants sprouting to life when rain came in. We also saw a dungeon entrance opening up during a rainstorm as well. But on top of the environmental stuff and NPCs changing and dungeon entrances opening up, we saw how player abilities can be affected. So they talk about the fact that weather might adjust the projectile speed for an archer, but we also saw an example of a wizard's lightning skill growing stronger during a storm, changing from single target to a multi-target chain ability. Really, really cool stuff. There was a little bit of story discussion here where they said, we've also spent a substantial amount of time creating the world story. Ultimately, the stories in an MMO are about the history that you all create. However, it's also important to write the background saga. I gotta be honest, in pretty much every MMO, I could not care any less about the hardline narrative, the main story quests that you play through, any cutscenes that pop up. It's just not what I come to MMOs for. For me, it's more about the world building and lore that are created and the storytelling that happens while you play the game. That is what I find most immersive. That is what I find most interesting. That's just a personal thing, but yeah, they're gonna have some storytelling. I'm expecting some cutscenes in this game with some main characters and some narrative arcs. I just don't care much about it in the MMO genre in particular, but hey, for the people who do, looks like there is going to be some here. Now moving on to discussion of combat. They didn't really actually dive much into details about the combat system in terms of how it functions, but more so about the weapon system. So they say combat is the backbone of MMO games. Like TL's open world, our combat system doesn't play out in a predictable way. In TL, player roles are decided by what weapon the player chooses. Rather than being confined to a class set forth by the game, players can always change weapons to suit the situation. Two different types of weapons can be combined, and changing between them allows players to maximize their strength. It also allows strategies that can cover potential weaknesses. I actually really enjoy this. I like both types of systems where you have hard and fast character classes, you pick the wizard or the warrior, but I have also enjoyed a lot of the various MMOs that have done this weapon type system. Some examples would be something like Elder Scrolls Online. Although they do have classes, there are also basically entire skill trees that come off of the weapons that you use. New World does something similar, even more so, because they don't have a class system. You are just picking your weapons, and those weapons determine your skills. Another great example would be Albion Online. Like with anything, there's pros and cons to the different approaches of doing class or classless combat. One of the reasons I'm excited about what they're talking about in Throne and Liberty is just primarily because it looks like they have a lot of potential skills and a lot of customization within each of the weapons. You take New World, for example, you got 3 skills when you picked a weapon. It looks like Throne and Liberty will have at least 5, maybe 6. Either way, it looks like they're gonna have a lot of customization, and there will be the combination of utilizing different weapons together, which is good. That's the idea. You've got 2 different weapon slots that you swap between. They can either enhance each other or make up for the weaknesses of one of the weapons. More details about combat here, where they said each weapon type offers defensive actions to protect players with good timing. Some sort of a block and or parry system will be available for every single type of weapon. And then they say through the use of several features, players can micromanage the more subtle aspects of combat. Connecting skill sets of different weapons allows players to experience the joy of combining and configuring weapons. This is the free class system that TL is so proud of. We got some details about PvP. They said we tried to come up with PvP rules that allowed players to decide whether they want to participate or not. Most of TL's fields are safe zones. Once competitions like regional events or boss raids begin, certain fields allow combat to occur. Players can proactively choose to participate or not. In whatever area a player is in, they can check what events and competitions are planned, allowing strategic gameplay and ensuring that there is no chance for players to fall into unexpected PvP situations. This is pretty clearly just they are going to broadcast if a zone is PvP enabled or not. They will tell you ahead of time when it will become PvP enabled, and this will allow you to decide if you want to engage in PvP or if you want to leave the area and come back once the PvP conflict is over. While I do like when games just have areas that are open PvP all the time, I appreciate that there is a large percentage of the player base of a lot of MMOs that doesn't want to engage in PvP, that doesn't want to get steamrolled by large groups of players or outgeared or outleveled, and they want to choose when they can PvP. And ultimately, probably, this is probably best for the health of any MMO, letting players choose, giving them the option. If they want to engage in the system, they can. If they want to avoid it and do something else, they can as well. Now, beyond the open world PvP with these zone events, there's also going to be guild wars. Of this, they said in TL's fields, there are objects which can be maintained by guilds only: the Blessing Stone and the Dimension Stone. The 2 stones together are called the Possession Stones. The acquisition of the Possession Stones allows for enhanced guild capabilities as well as procurement of necessary raw materials. In order to get the stones, guilds will fight. it. So there's going to be guild battles. You're fighting for possession of these stones, probably some sort of a zone control thing where you got to stand by the stone, maybe interact with it, and then gain possession after a set amount of time of defending it. So it's just the guild conquest system, basically. Sounds pretty interesting, especially combined with some of the various castle siege footage that we've seen. Really cool, large number of players, all sorts of siege equipment, and including these massive stone giants that players can get control of. This looks pretty interesting. Okay, so next up is platforms. Now remember at the top, they mentioned, the developer talked about how the best way to experience the game was on PC or console, but it is going to be playable on phones as well. They mentioned that TL offers a unique UI and UX experience depending on what type of device. PC have their own interface, console has its own interface, but also this game can be played by streaming on mobile. So I'm a little confused here as to whether or not this is going to be a mobile first game with that in mind. Although because they mention it can be played through streaming on mobile, this makes me think that it's just going to be, this is an alternate way to play a PC and console first game rather than being a mobile first game that's also getting ported to PC and consoles. I hope that's the case anyways, because like I said earlier, I do feel like a lot of times if mobile is the first way that a game is, the first consideration in a game's development and its design, I think it can really hamstring it, or has the potential to hamstring it. We'll just have to see what ends up happening with Throne and Liberty. Some other interesting stuff in the final section, they just touch on like the game's visual fidelity. You know, they say it looks good, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good, especially for the number of players. They touch on customization, character customization, the facial expression system, and the fact that you can upload your photos to make a character look like your face. No, thank you. No, thank you, but great if you want to do that. And then also that the game will support, quote, countless numbers of players concurrently, and they've spent a tremendous amount of time on optimization. They then said, we promise that the game will run as smoothly as possible. And I will admit, although early on optimization was a big concern, we saw some really poor frame rates in some early footage. A lot of what they've showed recently has had a ton of players on frame, and it all looked pretty smooth. So it does seem like the game has gotten better in this sense. Okay, so that is the recent director's preview video. There was a lot of really cool stuff in here. Some of it was retreading information we already knew, but there was a lot of new details, and if nothing else, we saw a lot of new interesting footage, a lot of gameplay footage, a lot of different examples of the things that they've talked about, and it has me pretty excited. I think this is looking pretty darn good. Now, I did cover this video a few months back, and since then there was also actually one other update. This came in the form of a closed beta testing highlight video where they showed a few interesting things. They showcased character creator, looks to have the usual amount of depth as many Korean MMOs, which is to say quite a lot of depth, quite a lot of customization options. We saw some shots of the hybrid action combat system. By my guesstimate, it just looks like they're going with the soft lock system, similar to what Elder Scrolls Online uses. We saw some animal transformations, like I mentioned earlier. This is just this game's mount replacement. There was a bunch of footage of PvE and PvP gameplay. Specifically, the PvP section showed a bunch of castle siege, and one thing that really stuck out to me the most in all of this was just the sheer scale of players. Like, by my count, there's got to be at least 100 players on screen in a few of these clips, and that is awesome to see. It seems like they're utilizing some sort of shadow or template characters to help with performance, basically like simple versions of character classes with fewer details and effects showing up on screen once you reach a certain number threshold. But regardless, lots of bodies on screen, lots of action, lots of effects going off. It all looks pretty cool, and I really like the scale. There are some odd things going on that I want to mention with this game. I've liked what they've talked about and what they've shown. I'm really curious if they're view botting, though. And I don't say that lightly, but basically, looking at the numbers of a lot of their videos, something just seems off. So for example, the highlight dev video that they just put out has 750,000 views. It might be over 800,000 or 900,000 by the time this recording gets finished, but only a few hundred engagements, like just like 200 or 300 likes and dislikes, and 39 comments. That is far, 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 far below the engagement numbers that you should have with over 750,000 views. Like, I don't know, it's just really disproportionate and it feels a little fishy. I don't want to accuse them of anything. I just should point out that the views to engagement are, as someone who has been on this platform for 12 years now, they are way off the mark. It just doesn't really make sense. I'll just assume it has to do with video embedding, and that's the answer. Or they're viewbotting, who knows? So as of now, Throne and Liberty is scheduled to release in the first half of 2023. It is coming to PC as well as console. I suspect we will get some beta testing prior to the actual release. As time goes on, and we see more of this game, while I am still certainly skeptical, especially because of who is developing and publishing the game, and the monetization that is almost certainly going to be very aggressive, very predatory, and as close to pay to win as you can get, if not outright pay to win, at the very least, almost certainly very, very full of pay to convenience. Even with those things in mind, the more I see, the better this game looks. If nothing else, I'm hoping for a fun gameplay experience. I'm hoping to get even just a few weeks or a month out of the game and just to explore a new world, enjoy some new systems. This open world with all of these players and these traversal systems and these open dungeons, dude, it looks really cool. I'm pretty pumped to explore and check it out. As always, we will navigate the monetization like we have to do with so many modern games, but especially live service games and MMOs. We will navigate it. We will deal with it. We will complain about it once we get more details, because we should continue to push back against it, even if it is shoveling against the tide and ultimately will have no effect because of the sheer number of people who just don't think about it and just don't care and are happy to spend. And hey, I'm happy to spend some money if I enjoy the game. I wish these games weren't so heavily monetized. It is the world that we live in, barring just not playing my favorite genre of games, which is live service games and MMOs. There's not much more I can do than complain, because I still want to play these games. I'm so sick of the monetization. I mean, I'm sick of talking about it. I just want to play and enjoy fun games. I will do that. I will still also complain about it. Hey, it makes for good content too. So get ready for the why you should be concerned about Throne and Liberty video. It'll happen at some point, I promise you. All right, that's going to do it for today. I'm excited about this game. I am. Hoping it turns out great. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.